Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Healthtech Pigeon podcast. With me today, I am delighted to be joined by Sergey and Artem from LongVC, which is a VC fund focused on an ageless future, and they are investing in companies that get us to that aging future. So, Sergey, Artem, welcome to the podcast. How are you guys both doing?
Thank you for having us. Doing good.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So it'd be useful, guys, to, first of all, tell us about yourselves. It's an interesting fund. It's an interesting thesis. It's going to hopefully increase the longevity of all of our lives, right? And I think that's what a lot of people listening will be certainly keen for when we're making headway with some of the stories we're going to talk about. We're making headway in cats and dogs, and certainly in humans. It's deep science, it's biotech, it's health tech, it's all of those different things. And so excited to get into it. But first of all, why don't we start with you, Artem? What is your background? How did you get into longevity? How did you get into venture capital?
Totally. So my path is quite non-traditional. I was a pre-med by training, and instead of going into medical school, I ended up doing a PhD program in engineering and computer science. And doing that work in Silicon Valley, when you're just like in the heart of where everything is happening, you get excited about the potential other opportunities that you can build and work on. And Stanford ecosystem is very much of a startup ecosystem. And so you see a lot of different ideas that people are percolating. And in the startup ecosystem, you also have the venture ecosystem that feeds in and pays for the startup ecosystem. And so that was my foray in through a non-traditional path into the venture space. I joined LongVC almost 2 years now. Sergey, right? It's time flies. It's been super exciting to see that we've seen a lot more interest in longevity as a field. We have notable names like Brian Johnson and other Huberman talk about what is important in extending lifespan, or what factors or biohacking situation you can do for longevity. And so in a way, there's more and more interest and emphasis on this, which is why we're definitely excited about the space.
Awesome. Sergey, what about yourself?
So my story is again quite a bit different. So I come from the founder's background originally, right? I wanted to be a doctor when I was a teenager. So when I was graduating high school, I never had the opportunity. So I grew up in Latvia, in a village, quite outside of the capital. So I didn't have the means to become a neurosurgeon, which I wanted to. And so I pursued the education in the other areas. So I ended up getting my first master's in quantitative methods and statistics. But I kind of tried to tackle my entrance into the life sciences through being a founder. So I started my first company when I was 22. That was in engineering. My first biotech company, which was a medical device company, at the age of 24. And that one was in the field of drug-eluting coatings, or drug delivery coatings for orthopedic and dental implants, or implants for reconstructive surgery as well. And then I kind of took a deeper dive into age-related diseases. So I worked with preclinical startups to help them fundraise, help them kind of transition from preclinical to clinical. Then I met with Gary, who is now my partner in the fund. And we have co-founded a third company together called LongGenesis. And we were one of the first ones on the market who kind of offered a take on how to utilize healthcare data for secondary usage without compromising the data integrity and compromising the patient's rights to that data. So essentially, without getting the actual data out of the hospital, we figured out a way of how to enable big pharma as well as clinical research organizations to use it still for faster patient identification for clinical trial recruitment. We were one of the first ones in the market to offer the fully electronic consent management and real-world data generation from patients. So that company, we actually ended up including it in the Fund 1 portfolio. So that company ended up working with all top 5 big pharma. even building some of the governmental level projects. So, for example, the population genome program of United Arab Emirates is actually built by Longenesis, kind of the national biobank, and the whole data logistics there. And yeah, I mean, in year 2021, we started our first vehicle. We kind of decided to institutionalize 3 partners in total back on the days, myself, Gary, and our third partner, Ilya. And we started LongVC, which is vintage 2021. It ended up being a 20 million fund, 20 million euro fund, the first one, a European-based yet with no geographic mandate. So we ended up investing essentially mostly in US. For the reason of, as Artem already mentioned, I mean, most of the breakthrough science actually being there. We kind of adopted, we built it around our network, first and foremost. So our deal access, our ability to put together, I think, one of the most recognized, if not the most recognized scientific advisory boards in the field, if you look at the venture funds out there. We kind of adopted a very hard definition of what longevity was for us, right? So, we invested in therapeutics, in diagnostics, and in what we call longevity infrastructure. All sorts of drug discovery platforms, or anything that essentially accelerates drug discovery and helps us validate drug candidates faster. But when it comes to longevity, we adopted a hard definition of essentially pursuing the age-related disease angle with a focus on investing in disease-modifying therapeutics. So we didn't really invest in let's cure aging type of thesis, right? So we didn't really invest in fundamental science because it's really hard to do so as a VC. There is no endpoint, right? So you cannot, if there is no endpoint, you cannot sell something or validate it. It was age-related diseases for us. Yet we always kept the aging biology in mind, and we ended up investing in less conventional biotech things, such as epigenetic reprogramming and senescent cell clearance, but also in more traditional things like ADCs in cancer, for example. And so the first fund is now fully invested, and we're moving into our second fund, which is going to be a fully US-based 250 million vehicle, investing slightly later stage, still having an early stage mandate, but then being able to invest to late stage clinical as well. That's it. A bit of a lengthy intro, but this is what we are right now. As Artem mentioned, we also have a sister fund, kind of a satellite vehicle, which is NIVC, that deals exclusively with animal health and animal longevity. We've also worked quite hard to establish kind of an ecosystem around ourselves. So we do have our own nonprofit, which is called Longevity Science Foundation, which we founded together, again, with Gary and Ilya, that provides non-dilutive research grants to researchers studying fundamental biology of aging. So not something that is still not fit for VC, but essentially, still in need to do. As well as we've participated in creating the Health and Longevity Medicine Society, which is now the largest society of longevity physicians globally. Swiss-based organization, and also most credible really organization in the space, uniting kind of the longevity doctors. That's it.
Wow, that's just that. That's awesome, man. I think what's interesting about what you've just explained is, so I think the term longevity can mean different things to different people, and what you've described is a very, for want of a better word, very credible, very scientific, very clear definition of what you consider longevity to be, and the contributors to people living longer, healthier lives, therapeutics, diagnostics, infrastructure that supports those things, drug discovery. And I think it's interesting that the term longevity definitely means different things to different people. It doesn't always mean those things. And your fund sounds incredibly interesting because of the range of things that you're doing, being essentially biotech, the pharma ecosystem, somewhat of the health tech ecosystem as well. You're spreading quite a lot of those things. And also what I like about what you've just explained is that, it's an overused term, but ecosystem. You're part of lots of different organizations that are supporting the same goal. You're pulling all of your resources, or spreading all of your resources into lots of different organizations that are ultimately aimed at a version of the future that you have in mind. My first question, I guess, is what is it about longevity that attracts you and interests you and makes you want to do this? Is it in part, this is humanity's greatest problem? Is it in part commercial opportunity? Is it in part you wanting to express yourself and your vision of what you want to do and legacy and things like that? I'm interested, like what attracts you to this in particular, or is it simply this is what I've always done, this is part of my background, and this is the obvious extension to it? Why this, and why set up all this infrastructure?
I feel like Artem wants to take a stab at the question of what longevity means to him first, and then I'll chime in.
All right, we'll take turns and deal. For me personally, I think everyone is getting older. I'm getting older. My parents are getting older. Like, we want to make sure that as you age, you not only age well and being healthy, but also enjoying that last part of your life is super important. Because there's an aspect, I teach a class at Stanford where we ask students who wants to live to be 100, and usually only about half of them raise their hand. And the follow-up question is, for those of you who didn't raise their hand, why did you not raise your hand? And the common answer is, well, if I'm going to live my last 20 years in pain, agony, discomfort, not being able to do things, being stuck in this frail body, I really don't want to go through that. I'd rather just kick the bucket before all that starts happening. And so there's an aspect of health span and lifespan, being able to have both as a good indicator of your ability to enjoy life while also being old. And so I think the most tangible, direct way in which we can contribute to that is by funding technologies that are specifically addressing disease modalities and indications that could help someone's health span and lifespan be better through different means, like Sergey was mentioning, of both therapeutic and non-therapeutic modalities.
I can chime in on that. So I totally agree. Look, so I think, first and foremost, in order to invest in biotech, you need to be an absolute optimist. Right. There are so many areas where you can put your money in and see a return with a much more confidence, much lower risk profile, essentially, and much faster, for that matter as well. So if you compare biotech to pretty much any other segment of the market, it is a very turbulent space to be investing in to begin with, especially early stage. Now, what is interesting is, if you look at us as kind of units in the society, right? So we all come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have different histories. We have different family compositions, different economic kind of capacities, buying powers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, interestingly, what unites all of us is basically an issue of premature death, right? As much as we like it or not. And the truth is, doesn't really matter who you are, somewhere by the age of 40, the nature's warranty period on you pretty much expires, right? So you start accumulating inflammation, you start accumulating your ECM, so your extracellular matrix gets hardened, gets more and more kind of scar tissue, and you're basically exhausted your timeline where nature thought that this is kind of, the time you have to replicate, and you're kind of no longer needed biologically, right? So the issue of prolonging health span, not a lifespan. Lifespan is not important, as Artem said. The issue of prolonging health span is something that all of us share. It doesn't really matter who we are and where we come from, right? So I think there's absolutely a mission component to this, for sure. I think I'm also one of these, I would still say fairly unfortunate examples where I got to experience the age-related disease segment from all three possible angles. So I got to experience it as an investor. I got to experience it as a founder working in the space. I also got to experience it as a patient. right? So, for example, like I got diagnosed, rare disease diagnosed at the age of 28, which is now what I'm 33, so 5 years ago. And what I can tell you, I'm okay, right? But what I can tell you is losing kind of basic body functions is something you don't think about, like something you cannot really imagine. But experiencing it is a whole different ballgame. It is an experience so bad and so mind-blowingly inadequate to your normal life that what you realize is that you would actually work pretty hard to prevent it altogether from happening again, right? And this is something that kind of we'll all face, really, even if you look at the curves, right? So the cause of death, typical cause of death curves. But up to the age of 40, these are external causes that are most likely to kill a human being, right? So like being hit by a truck or something. But then cancer kicks in, then neurological kick in, then cardiovascular kicks in and never actually diminishes as a risk, etc. So I think there is a lot of work to do, and our approach here is really to try to understand aging through actionable items, and this is why we go disease by disease, right? So if you search for disease modifying treatments, that means that if you succeed in one disease area, you will also, as a subproduct of it, crack the code of a certain aging mechanism that has triggered this cascade that has led to the disease. And by solving these piece by piece, you will eventually end up with kind of a sum of findings, right? That will lead you to, call it a longevity drug, call it whatever you want to call it, right? But some sort of a revelation in terms of, okay, how this whole thing works and how can you prevent it systemically? That's that.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's personal, isn't it? Healthcare, and you're quite right about the potential of returns. Health tech, biotech. There are more obvious and sensible places to go and make money, but there is no other sector that I have come across where people will consider it so personal. From a founder perspective as well, with it being personal, you get the purpose and the motivation to run through all the brick walls every day that you have to, and to weather those storms that you have to every day as a founder when it is that personal, whether it's yourself, whether it's a family member. And yeah, I can completely see and appreciate why you'd be in this sector and doing everything that you're doing, particularly that play around. I'm not just in this for a VC and returns. I'm setting up the nonprofit. I'm setting up the society, because all of these things will outlive me. All of these things will make sure that this is a play for a sector that will go on. And I think there's a great deal of respect that you're getting from everyone across the space for doing so. So, yeah, well done for doing so. My question before we launch into the stories is, you mentioned Brian Johnson at the start, Artem. And I've seen a lot of Brian Johnson's content recently, and it's been interesting, his change in content, I think, because he's come out quite publicly and said, I spend $2 million a year roughly on figuring out things for my own health. But actually, people have been vilifying me for doing so. People have been making fun of me. People have been doing all these things, whereas I'm investing my own money to discover what the human body is capable of. I'm trying to figure out these things. And so everyone seems to be attacking me. But ultimately, it's my choice about what I want to do. But I'm trying to democratize this information about how we can all live better. Surely that's an honorable thing to do. Why am I not getting more respect? And it's been really interesting, like seeing that shift in content and seeing him do loads of interviews on that, because actually, he's right. Like, he doesn't have to spend that money. He's exited a company. He could do whatever he wants. He's choosing to do this, and he's choosing to share it very publicly. And when you do that, you're putting yourself up for scrutiny. You're putting yourself up for whatever the public will say about you. And, you've got to take the haters and all the rest of it. But he's right. At the end of the day, he is democratizing a lot of information about these things, and he's aging at 0.7, 0.6 per year. And, he's very public about why and how and everything that he's doing, the things that he's stopped doing, the things that he's continuing. He's very public about it. And so I'm looking at Brian Johnson quite interestingly at the moment, and I'm interested to follow him and see what happens, because particularly he'll admit where he's wrong as well. And I think, the scientist in us will massively appreciate that. He's not trying to say, here, I'm doing the best and I'm the greatest and I'm going to live forever and all these things. He's just sharing like a scientist would about, hey, I tried this and actually we learned something new and then we're going to change. And again, I think that always commands respect when people are willing to do that so publicly. But I'm interested because you guys are the experts in this space, right? You guys are living and breathing this all day. Like, what's your perception of Brian Johnson? What do you feel about him? Is he a good thing for the longevity space overall? Is he not, and why? What do you guys think of him?
I think it's good to have additional spotlight and additional visibility into the ecosystem, so that way we can actually have more eyeballs, more funding, more people interested in the space. And I think that having certain people who are cheerleaders or spearheading different means of sharing that and distributing that information is always great. Having a having a professor, their reach might not be as much as someone who wears a shirt that says "Don't die." And so, because of that, having much more of kind of like a persona that embodies this movement of biohacking, this movement of can I understand my body, this movement of democratization of longevity sciences and all these protocols is a good thing. And then the next part, which would be interesting to see in this progression of his, is the translatability of these protocols to the average Joe. In terms of, not everyone's going to spend $2 million a year on themselves to do a lot of these protocols, but in someone doing these protocols, the rest of us can kind of see what tangibly works, what doesn't, and then what might be a useful thing for people to try that will not cost a lot of money. And so that's how I look at it. I think that PR is good. You're always going to have haters. That's the norm. That's the norm of doing anything. And if you can't handle that, don't do what you're doing. That's the simplest point. But I've met him in person before. He does have a lot of excitement about what he's working on, and definitely, and at least in the Bay Area community, there's this aspect of a tech entrepreneur turned biohacker or turned longevity enthusiast, and then a lot of tech folks who also kind of emulate and resonate with that. More like, how can I do something like that? There's that aspect as well of like, what can I do that's practical that I could do in terms of protocols? So that's how I view it. I think that it's good for us to have additional visibility, because then as a fund, we are able to fundraise more and we're able to invest in more companies that are doing tangible science. We're able to get more money through the Longevity Science Foundation to allocate to researchers who are actually doing basic fundamental science and so forth. So all PR is good PR in this case for us.
Nice. Anything to add, Sergey? Are you happy with that? Should we move on?
I'm definitely happy with that. So I think we share, as a fund, we share public opinion on issues anyway. I think, I think it is a bit of a difficult one for me. I'll give you a metaphor. So are you familiar with professional tennis, for example? Or like, yeah, so that's a good metaphor then. So you do enjoy, or you would find it useful to look into Federer's or Djokovic's training routine. The point is, though, if you start repeating it as an amateur tennis player, for example, you will probably you won't die, but you will break, right?
You might after a 4-hour hit with his hitting partner.
And that is my point with Brian exactly. So it does depend heavily on what sort of filter you attach to it. If you attach a filter of, hey, I'm trying this out and I'm just sharing results with the world, I know most of this is disclaimer. Most of this doesn't have any proof, doesn't have any data to back it up, and it's not recommended for your average human being watching this, right? So if the filter is I'm just sharing it with the world for the purpose of common knowledge, so I'm basically putting myself on the line, and I'm in some sort of way sacrificing myself as a guinea pig, so you don't have to when we have more data to work with. Well, that's congratulable, right? It's great, and it is a sacrifice for the community, for the sake of the community, in some way. And I'm not kind of being ironic about it. It actually is. Now the problems start when this gets associated or like synonymized with the field of longevity, or with longevity medicine, because any healthy longevity medicine society people, or any longevity physician that actually does this as a healthcare provider, right, would say that 90% of it is not okay and is not recommended for patients to try, especially to try themselves, especially once they saw it on YouTube or TV or Netflix or whatever that the channel was, right? So once it gets mixed up with the overall perception of what longevity is, and people start thinking that, transfusing younger blood or whatever in yourself is longevity and is a longevity treatment, this is where I start having problems, because longevity as a field is data driven, it's evidence based, right? And it's not really about sci-fi and transplanting heads and freezing people like a lot of people might think, etc. So it is good PR, absolutely so, because it is served in a very populistic and a very digestible manner for the public to actually consume it. But you should be responsible for the filter and the lens you attach to it. So you should not really try to synonymize it with the field of longevity. You should look at this as an isolated biohacking example, which should not be repeated, but is very fun to watch, right? So in the very same way as you would not repeat the training routine of an ATP top 10 player, because it would most probably break you. It will not make you a better amateur player. It's just because you're not built for this purpose. You're built for something else. And that is exactly the metaphor that kind of I see fit here. Otherwise, look, I congratulate Brian on everything he's done. I think this is tremendous. Although philosophically, spending all of your lifetime not to age kind of defies the purpose of living, in a weird way. But again, if you see use in it, if you see the purpose in it itself, then it's all good.
It's like I said at the start, longevity means different things to different people. And I think the more of that content and that side of things that you consume, you could end up thinking that longevity, and there'll be people listening that to them longevity is now associated with UV light therapy and supplements and these things that are not drug discovery therapeutics working on disease profile. Like and that's the danger, I think, with my sort of comms and marketing hat on. It's like we need science to claim the word back, because you're quite right, data driven, evidence based. I think that's potentially some of the danger, because ultimately he's not building a small large molecule based company and doing things at a sort of a biotech cellular biology level. It's more of what I mentioned previously, which I think is part of the danger. But to your points, it's someone popularizing it. And whilst being populist, it is bringing interest to the sector. So we can definitely agree on that. So our first story this week. So Shark Tank investor Kevin O'Leary, he's made 20x on a startup selling genetic testing kits for cats. So we had a small stake in Basepaws, which is a startup offering this sort of at-home genetic testing for cats. And it was acquired for over 50 million. Obviously returning the story being largely about him. But let's talk more about genetic testing for cats, what that means for longevity, what that means for, we're seeing things like animals, they're moving to humans. Our next story this week, we've heard about anti-aging pills for dogs. Artem, what's your take on this?
I think it's an exciting space. I think that just genetic testing as a whole, the more cheaper it has become, the more we've been able to understand what's going on with the things we cannot visibly see. And so as we get, if you think about it, it's like the more we expand on the data sets, the more we get those data sets to be available. And now with newer language models and newer methods of dissecting that data, we can get better insights that could lead to better treatments for pet owners in this case, which could lead to extending your pet's lifespan or health span. There's a lot that we can find with that. And then just the fact that technology has become so much more democratized, whereas before it was very expensive to do a gene sequencing profile of any capacity. And now you can do it with an at-home kit. You send it off, you get some results, and you're like, wow, okay, well, I know what's going on with my pet in XYZ space. So I think overall it was a really, they had a very good first mover advantage to jump into a space that was growing. And as any pet owner who's curious about their pet, this was a very much like, oh, I can take a test. I don't have to do much work. I don't even have to go to a vet visit or a vet office, and I can get output and they will give me a readout. That's cool. So I view that as something very, very exciting in this space.
Yeah, so on my end, there are a few things to kind of to say as a disclaimer here. First and foremost, the best person to talk about baseballs is now on our team as a partner in NIVC, Anna Skaya, who is the founder of baseballs, right? And Anna was the one pitching on Shark Tank and kind of getting Kevin O'Leary's investment eventually, etc.
Wow.
Second of all, Gary, my partner in the fund, is an early investor, angel investor in baseballs. Right, so he was much earlier than Kevin O'Leary. He was one of the very first checks of pre-seed in baseballs, and I also happen to know him from that time as well. So I've witnessed how baseballs actually developed and how they transformed through, using fur for the first testing, and then moving to kind of other biological samples. And I've seen the first lab, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of witnessed the whole under the hood type of story. I'm pretty sure that I cannot disclose like 95% of it publicly, but especially after the company got acquired. But I think baseballs was indeed the first mover. I think a lot of its success is attributed to the talent of the founder, because Anna is actually really exceptional when it comes to being a CEO, being able to pitch the product, being able to communicate the vision, and really drive the sales and drive business development for the company that was heavily dependent on retail, right? Because it was retail that was driving the sales. I should also point out that the deal like this kind of validates the pet market in a way, in the sense that it validates the need for data in the same way as the data needed and companies get acquired for their data stacks in the human part of biotech. In the very same way, baseballs actually built most of its value by acquiring data. Right. And the largest, I think the largest part of value of baseballs is actually being able to extract these insights, and really work with the data stack that they have created. Right. And I think that was a major validation, to how, pet pharma looks at things, that it's not only about retail. It's also about personalization, and it's also about essentially trying to understand how to make treatments more efficient through using inputs such as genetic information. So baseballs is very much a landmark case, I think, in that regard. Now, when it comes to how it contributes to human, I mean, look, it's a bit of a philosophical question, right? Because it all starts with animal models anyway. We don't test drugs on cats. That's true, right? So it's normally like mice models and preclinical, maybe large primates sometimes, but usually it's a mouse model in a traditional sense. But it still starts with animals anyway. So most of the insights that are used or are generated in any sort of therapeutic or sometimes diagnostic, like Baseballs was, startups in the pet space are in one way or another translatable to the human part in some shape or form. And it was a good investment for Kevin, obviously.
Well, clearly. Actually, one thing I do want to ask you about, you mentioned Anna being companies like most companies can be based on the founder, the talent of the founder, and you talked about her obviously being an exceptional founder now on your team and things. What is it that you guys look for in a founder that you might have seen in her, or you are seeing in other people that you're investing in? I know this is a big question. We could do another hour's podcast on this, but is there anything that comes to mind when you think, actually, when I think about her, this is the trait, and I look for that in other people? Is there anything that comes to mind with her?
Artem, you are the deal team lead after all. You're the best one to answer that.
Totally. So I can't speak to Anna as a founder directly because I did not know her at the time that she was building Basepaws. But I can tell you broadly how certain characteristics are important, and an aspect of Anna's resilience and Anna's excitement about what she's building. And most importantly, as Sergey alluded to, storytelling. All of VC is a story. And if you can create a story that has a compelling narrative and a compelling beginning and end, someone understands that, they can relate to that. So making something that's complicated uncomplicated is a skill. Not everyone has that, and I feel like the successful founders are able to do that. And the folks who are less successful but still trying, there's an aspect of grit and resilience involved with that. They learn storytelling as a part of their arsenal of like tools. But I'd say storytelling is definitely a big component that helps with presentation and helps with someone understand who's not a scientist, right? We're in a very technical space. We understand the science. We understand what's going on with the nitty gritty underneath the hood, but not everyone is like that. And if you're trying to scale out your technology, going back to Brian Johnson, he's communicating complex things in what he is trying to do as a non-complex manner to have the average person understand that as well. And that goes back to being able to create a narrative and a story and a persona.
So our second story this week, anti-aging pill for dogs has cleared an FDA hurdle. The drug's aimed at dogs 10 years or older that weigh 14 pounds or more. Now, when something sounds too good to be true, I've been told and I've learnt in life that it probably is. Now, I own a dog, and if I could do anything, if I could pay any sum of money to extend this dog's life, I would do it. And so I ask you guys, I've seen so much of this in the news about this anti-aging pill. Can you talk to me about what this is? Does it work? And are we going to find it coming to human medicine?
So usually if it's too good to be true, it usually is. The golden ticket of extending someone's lifespan. That's kind of like what the fountain of youth and longevity, right? You're trying to understand how best to help someone live forever. And I think that the article that you comment on from the company called Loyal, they've developed what is considered an anti-aging pill, and I don't think they market it in a way that says they stop something from dying. I think the headline is catchy, by whoever wrote the article. I don't remember the author's name, but the way in which they are selling it is it can slow the progression of aging, which there's been definitely work done around rapamycin, which is one of the drugs that they are referencing in this pill as a drug that's been commonly used to prevent organ transplant rejections. And so they're repurposing it as a means of potentially extending a dog's lifespan, but they are still in studies, right? They're still in extensive plans to enroll a lot more senior dogs across the veterinary markets and do some clinical work over the next couple of years. And they're going to be testing their lead asset against the placebo to get this data on how well this works. And so they, as far as I remember reading, they have a reasonable expectation of efficacy for moving this towards approval and having this be prescribed as something as a supplement that can help with delaying the aging onset. And so I think, again, going back to storytelling, this is a great story, a great headline. Now, will this work? Let's see. Talk to us in 4 years. Let's look at the clinical trial data and let's see what happens with these aged or elderly dogs and whether or not they do live longer. And if they do, then and to how much they're able to live, then we can say that they have developed a treatment to delay or potentially reverse aging in these dogs.
I kind of agree. Look, I love dogs, right? Grew up with one. Don't have one right now, but I grew up with a dog, and so I kind of understand all the moral hurdles and everything that the dog owner goes through, especially as the dog ages. I think so. Loyal created a drug that caters for kind of correcting the metabolic dysfunction, right? And this is the way that we should be thinking about it. So it's not a longevity drug per se. They basically pinpointed the mechanism that would, if corrected, and they are specifically marketing it for dogs that are heavier than a specific. Yeah. So in the very same way as the discussion right now is whether GLP-1 drugs are longevity drugs or not in human. Are they? Well, if you lose weight, your cardiometabolic health and cardiometabolic risks decrease. A bunch of other stuff decreases, or your risk of diabetes decreases. Does it cater for your for better chances for you to have longer health span? Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're now less likely to die of a heart attack, right? So, and this is the way you should be thinking about these things. There is no such thing as a longevity pill. And there never will be. Not for dogs, not for humans, not for anyone out there. What there will be is something with a mechanism of action that somehow allows us to decrease the risks or prevent several age-related conditions from happening, right? And that is something that Loyal is doing for dogs, right? So through correcting these metabolic inefficiencies or whatever, I mean, kind of, adopting the very same rhetoric as GLP-1s are for humans right now. We kind of, I think we kind of see the same narrative, right? By doing this, you decrease the risks that grow with age. And by decreasing these risks, you are able to live longer. That's that. Is it a breakthrough in the pet longevity, in the pet health? Yeah, absolutely. It is. Loyal is a famous case. And it will still be one of the kind of maybe it will be actually the first in class for pets in that with that sort of indication. And it is great. But we should remember that we're not talking about anti-aging pills in any shape or form. We are talking about targeting a process that increases the likelihood of getting age-related diseases. By targeting that process or optimizing something, we're decreasing our likelihood, both dogs and humans, by the way, as well, in the GLP-1 case, for example, to die from something that is age-related. That's it.
That's the big takeaway for me here, that if scientists are going to reclaim the word longevity, we need to have a focus on this in the way that we're talking about it. And exactly what you just said, there is no silver bullet. There is no single pill that you're going to take to stop the aging process, as if there is a single aging process. What we're talking about is identifying, in this case, a metabolic pathway that is contributing to age-related disease, there are other pathways for other things, in the same way that there's no single mechanism of action of cancer. There are many mechanisms of action, and thus we're trying to find them in a similar fashion. So that neatly brings me on to our last story actually for this week. Healx has dosed the first rare cancer patient with an AI-created drug. So this article in Business Weekly, written by Tony Quested, cool surname. Cambridge biotech company Healx is on the cusp of history. They've dosed the first patient with this AI-enabled drug. It's in a phase 2 trial. Patients with neurofibromatosis, so NF type 1. Sergey, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a bit unfair. The reason for that is we actually have an AI for drug discovery company that has done this already, which was the first one to have a phase 2A drug in the patients in the clinical trial in the rare disease indication. And that company is in silico medicine. And still is a fully AI designed molecule against IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is also a pretty rare and very much unaddressed indication, right? Because there is no disease modifying treatment whatsoever. More to that, they already have the first data readout, which is positive. So increasing lung capacity in patients, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit unfair. I'm not trying to diminish the achievement of Healx here, right?
Bit of lazy journalism, is it, Sergey, that they haven't done their research?
Yeah, so I'm just saying that some homework was not. I don't recall what is the date on the article. Maybe the date is kind of not the freshest one, right?
24th of February 2025, last week.
Yeah, well, then it's lack of homework, right? So because the article should have been about in silico medicine and their IPF indication, then Healx as a runner-up, right? That being said, though, look, it's great. It signals I think a paradigmatic shift that we can not only be the first ones, so there are more cases now. We can actually repeat the successes of bringing AI designed drugs in clinical trials in humans and really hope for positive efficacy readouts. So I think it's good. I think it signals the paradigm shift in how pharma will develop drugs in the future, because now obviously kind of a molecule candidate and a drug candidate in 40 days or 2 months is not science fiction. It's now a reality with kind of the AI powered applications. I think it makes sense for the company to go after a rare disease because it automatically means an accelerated approval because it's an unmet need. So, and it has been historically a good strategy to pursue, even if you have potential, let's say, in other cancer indications, right? It is feasible to go after a rare disease indication because it's faster approval. This is how you kind of prove your point and prove your platform. And then you can go after other indications with tweaks and other assets that you might have in the pipeline on the earlier stage. So that's all great. I know for myself specifically how nasty the life of rare disease patients are whenever you don't have a disease modifying treatment for the thing that you have. I mean, mine was on the neurological, neurodegenerative side, but, cancer is even more, the cadence of the disease is much faster, right? So it's actually much more aggressive in that sense. So I can totally get what is the unmet need on the patient side that they're solving. But I encourage more homework to be done, by journalists. Because this one should mention at least in silico that was the first in that regard.
It should. Artem, drug discovery companies. What are you guys looking for when you're looking at this space? Where's the opportunity? What sorts of companies are you looking for? Where are you looking to find them? I mean, this one's Cambridge in the UK. Are there other hotspots around Europe? Like, what does that look like? What does that drug discovery sort of universe looks like when you're trying to source these deals?
So in silico was the first. They were a first mover in a space that was at one point no one was giving a lot of thought to, and now there's been a Cambrian explosion of the amount of AI for drug discovery companies. And so at the point of, I think Healx it's about a couple years old, maybe 8, 9 years old or so. It could be that, they got this headline because they were going after a rare disease, is the way that this story was pitched. But needless to say, I'd say Insilico really pushed the path forward in what is developing a drug using computational modeling biology. What I'm most excited about now is that there is an opportunity and opportunities of these massive data sets that are being developed, being cultivated, and or have been developed, but just are getting processed now better. And more folks are getting the ability and compute to be able to dissect that data in a way that's more meaningful. So even if you do have an AI designed drug, you still have to go through the regulatory pathway, and whether or not it will be effective is going to be does it have a stronger binding affinity? Is the drug going to be able to have a better output than what is traditionally designed? But a lot of pharma development, a lot of that ecosystem, they understand that the data sets that they have curated in-house can now be mined for something that's more insightful. And so for a lot of the new folks that are building in this space, we're excited about new and novel modalities in which they're going after that have not yet been done. So at one point there was a wave of AI for drug discovery companies. And so now it's like maybe the shift for AI and computational chemistry discovery companies, of which we're looking at protein discovery. I think protein, disclaimer though to all you the listeners, this is not in any case saying that these are the only verticals we focus on, but it's just more so like the things that I'm seeing in terms of trends. Protein sequencing, for example, is an enabling technology that we are going to see a lot more companies spin out of, as all DNA to RNA to protein, that typical progression. You're targeting proteins when you're giving someone a drug. You're not necessarily changing someone's DNA as much. And so maybe as we sequence more proteins, we'll get more data and we'll get more insight on what's going on under the hood. And maybe we'll have better targets for that. Maybe we can actually do better modeling of different disease states with the way in which the proteins that are expressed are interacting with each other at any given time. So that I think is our most exciting area. So we've invested in a company, Glyphic Biotech, that is doing protein sequencing. And so we're excited about that enabling technology to kind of move the needle forward. And then now seeing more compute and more of these open source models being released that are given more insight into how complex biology is working is kind of where we stand.
Awesome. Guys, it's been a pleasure. I'm sorry for chairing this so badly that we've run out of time. Didn't give you easily didn't give you enough time there to talk about those stories, but we can definitely get you guys back on to talk about some more longevity in biotech. Before we finish, I'm interested with everything that you're seeing, and you don't have to give long answers here, but with everything that you're seeing, you have such a unique vantage point here with the things that you're looking at, pointing towards us all having longer, healthier lives. What is one thing that you are excited about? That can be a company, that can be a particular space, it can be a particular mechanism of action, it can be a protein, it can be whatever. What's one thing that you guys are really fired up about at the moment?
That's a hard one because there's a lot of things that we're excited about, right? I think just the longevity ecosystem as a whole is super, super exciting. For me, it's the democratization of compute and being able to get more novel insights that will lead to a ton of different application layer built companies on top of the base foundational model development that folks are building. So your foundational models are being democratized. Those foundational models dissect data in more meaningful ways. The application layer on version 2.0 is where a lot of the excitement and building is going to happen. So I think high level, that's that area, less so much about a molecule or a particular pathway, but more so about the area of application layers on top of foundational model development.
I won't give you a specific technology, right? But I'm going to give you few vectors. One is AI for drug discovery, simply because it allows treatments to reach patients faster. Ultimately, because this is what it's all about, right? So you want a treatment that works, reach patients faster. Simple as that. And second one is our ability, as we progress into understanding the aging biology, into understanding how things that we have disregarded before, and haven't spent that much time on, such as, for example, systemic inflammation, microbiome, etc., how we start accounting for these things. And what's most important, how we as a field start to kind of acknowledge that we were wrong with some of our hypotheses. And neurodegeneration comes to mind instantly, right? With Alzheimer's, for example, and the whole amyloid story. We have finally acknowledged that we're wrong. And that kind of spiraled into the whole new wave of new hypotheses that are inflammation based, that are even sugar consumption based, microbiome based, et cetera, et cetera. So we finally start to kind of understand that, trying to catch the bullets is part of the story. You actually need to find the gun where these bullets come from. And I think that that kind of spirals us into an area and an era of much more kind of self-aware work in biotech when it comes to kind of disease modifying treatments. This is something that I'm genuinely excited about. I'm not giving you a specific disease area. What I'm giving you is kind of an ideological vibe that we are experiencing, which is great. And then last but not least, look, I just love seeing people be more self-aware, right? And suddenly caring about even basic things like diet and exercise and whatever. And I mean, you're an MD, right? So that's kind of 90% of your success anyway. So yeah, exciting times.
It is, man. It is, and it's like people say, if you could prescribe the effects of 8 hours of sleep in a pill, it would be a pill that everyone took, and it is ultimately those basics that everyone's going to launch off. The amount of information that we have now, the amount of data that exists, the amount of monitoring that we're willing to do to ourselves, just when we're out and about in the real world and in public, we are about to have so much data, and it's exponential, that we can work with to form so many different and new conclusions about the best ways to live our lives. Add to that the hard science, the biotech, the therapeutics, the diagnostics, the focus on mechanisms that prevent cancers, that optimize our metabolic health. It is a watershed moment. It feels like this is a new frontier of medicine. You mentioned the microbiome there. We are so early days. Startups come out saying that they understand the microbiome. It's a ridiculous phrase. We're so early on with the research on all of this, and it's such a frontier that you guys are not going to be short of startups to invest in. You're not going to be short of anything in your careers going down this route. And I'm looking forward to see what happens with you guys. I think it's I think there'll be many more than just funds too. So I look forward to following you guys. If people listening want to get in touch, either because they are interested in getting investment or they want to learn more about the fund, what's the best place for them to do so?
I think it's LinkedIn, right? So normally for us personally, it's LinkedIn for sure. For the fund, there is one email that we use as a kind of the general inbox, which is hq@longevc.com. Right. It's also available on the website, I believe. So that is the one that we actually read. That is the one where we receive pitch decks from founders that we do not know and we haven't talked before. And this is the one we also reply to. So please do not be discouraged by the HQ thing. It's not an info email. We actually look at it, and that's the best way.
Perfect. Really appreciate you guys coming on and for sharing all of your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.